So we are on, it's called, wait a minute, it's called Life Sketch of Experience, but it begins on page 569 as an introduction. Is everyone there? Everybody have it? Okay. We're probably going to read about 3 paragraphs. As I was reading through it, I think I don't know if there's going to be a lot of commentary that we can really give. I mean, we might be able to relate to our own experiences, what we've been through, and we may be able to kind of interject that way. But as we read through it, we're going to go through 3 paragraphs at a time, and we'll stop and just kind of see if we can't glean a little bit from it, and we'll see how far we can move along. I'll start with the introduction, and then we'll see. Since we don't have a lot of people here today, we'll have to kind of share, and I can't pick on Abby because she's not here. Again, I feel it is my duty to speak to the Lord's people in great plainness. It is humiliating to me to point out the errors and rebellion of those who have long been acquainted with us and our work. I do it to correct wrong statements that have gone abroad concerning my husband and myself, calculated to injure the cause, and as a warning to others. If we only were to suffer, I would be silent. But when the cause is in danger of reproach and suffering, I must speak, however humiliating. Proud hypocrites will triumph over our brethren because they are humble enough to confess their sins. God loves his people who keep his commandments and reproves them, not because they are the worst, but because they are the best people in the world. As many as I love, says Jesus, I rebuke and chasten. I would call special attention to the remarkable dreams given in this little work, all with harmony and distinctiveness illustrating the same things. The multitude of dreams arise from the common things of life, with which the Spirit of God has nothing to do. There are also false dreams, as well as false visions, which are inspired by the spirit of Satan. But dreams from the Lord are classed in the Word of God with visions, and are as truly the fruits of the spirit of prophecy as visions. Such dreams, taking into the account the persons who have them and the circumstances under which they are given, contain their own proofs of their genuineness. May the blessing of God attend this little work. Okay, so there is a foreword to what's going to kind of be looked at here. As we begin, sketch of experience. Any volunteers?
I'll do it.
Okay, Marlene, we'll start with Marlene. Go for 3 paragraphs.
3?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Give my voice in order.
That's right.
Sketch of experience from December 19th.
Hang on a minute, he's going to give you, there you go.
Sketch of experience from December 19th, 1866 to October 20th, 1867. Having become fully satisfied that my husband would not recover from his protracted sickness while remaining inactive, and that the time had fully come for me to go forth and bear my testimony to the people, I decided, contrary to the judgment and advice of the church at Battle Creek, of which we were members at that time, to venture a tour in northern Michigan with my husband in his extremely feeble condition in the severest cold of winter. It required no small degree of moral courage and faith in God to bring my mind to the decision to risk so much, especially as I stood alone with the influence of the church, including those at the head of the work at Battle Creek, against me. But I knew that I had a work to do, and it seemed to me that Satan was determined to keep me from it. I had waited long for our captivity to be turned, and feared that precious souls would be lost if I remained longer from the work. To remain longer from the field seemed to me worse than death, and should we move out, we could but perish. So on the 19th of December, 1866, we left Battle Creek in a snowstorm for Wright, Ottawa. I'm not sure of that.
That's right. County.
Michigan. Ottawa County, Michigan. My husband stood the long and severe journey of 90 miles, much better than I feared, and seemed quite as well when we reached our old home at Brother Root's and when we left Battle Creek. We were kindly received by this dear family and as tenderly cared for as Christian parents can care for invalid children. We found this church in a very low condition, with a large portion of its members, the seeds of disunion and dissatisfaction with one another were taking deep root, and a worldly spirit was taking possession of them. And notwithstanding their low state, they had enjoyed the labors of our preachers so seldom that they were hungry for spiritual food. Here commenced our first effective labors since the sickness of my husband. Here he commenced to labor as in former years, though in much weakness. He would speak 30 or 40 minutes in the forenoon of both Sabbath and first day, and I would fill up the rest of the time, and then speak about an hour and a half in the afternoon of each day. We were listened to with the greatest attention. I saw that my husband was growing stronger, clearer, and more connected in his subjects. And when, on one occasion, he spoke 1 hour with clearness and power, with the burden of the work upon him, as when he used to speak, my feelings of gratitude were beyond expression. I arose in the congregation and for nearly half an hour tried with weeping to give utterance to them. The congregation felt deeply. I felt assured that this was the dawn of better days for us.
Okay. As we sum up with this, looking back in a little bit, James and Ellen had been working so much and so feverishly that James fell ill, and he had to go to the sanitarium and the health institute and get better. And that's what, and it kind of in sequence as how it's come along. And that as you know, they did not want him to do any physical labor or to leave or to get up and walk around. They just kind of wanted him to languish there and play cards and maybe a little dancing. And she felt that that was, number one, not the best for anybody, especially for those believers, because it didn't do anything but turn their mind from God. So she decided, or well, they decided, that it was time to leave the health institute, even though he wasn't fully back on his feet. And we see here, you know, she really made a hard decision. I mean, I don't know about you. I know about me. I would not want to leave in the middle of December in a horse and buggy and go 90 miles. Michigan is a cold state. You know, Ohio's not that far south from it, and we get a little bit, but they get quite a bit. And so that was something that, and then she says they left in a snowstorm. That would take some determination. You know, for me, I would be bucking it as hard as I could. So we see, I mean, she's got some determination here to do, and she felt that she was compelled to do the Lord's work, and she was afraid to leave any longer.
The influence of the church and those at the head of the work was against her.
Yes.
Not just the nature,
Mm-hmm.
snowstorms in winter, the people, the leaders were saying, don't do this.
Don't do this.
But she kept saying that she seen the work was not being done.
Mm-hmm.
And she felt that this was separating her from doing the Lord's work. So that was faith, stepping out of faith to go, especially to a place that really, really needed their
Mm-hmm.
help.
And she said it was 90 miles away. That's a distance. It's, you know, it amazes me.
She wasn't doing what was best for either one of them,
Mm-hmm.
because they're looking at it through man's eyes.
Yeah, and her husband was still ailing.
Yeah.
He wasn't really well yet. And she remarks on how he handled the journey better than she did, remarkably well, is what she said. And so anyway, now we're at this little church, and they seem to be responding to the words of the Lord. Our next reader? Go ahead. Aaliyah was first. She jumped in there. Go ahead. 3 paragraphs.
We remained with
Wait a minute. It's coming at you.
We remained with this people 6 weeks. I spoke to them 25 times and my husband 12 times. As our labors with this church progressed, individual cases began to open before me, and I commenced to write out testimonies for them, amounting in all to 100 pages. Then commenced labor for these persons as they came to Brother Root's, where we were stopping, and with some of them at their homes, but more especially in meetings at the house of worship. In this kind of labor, I found that my husband was a great help. His long experience in this kind of work, and he had labored with me in the past, had qualified him for it. And now that he entered upon it again, he seemed to manifest all that clearness of thought, good judgment, and faithfulness in dealing with erring of former days. In fact, no other two of our ministers could have rendered me the assistance that he did. A great and good work was done for this dear people. Wrongs were freely and fully confessed. Union was restored, and the blessing of God rested down upon the work. My husband labored to bring up the systematic benevolence of the church to the figures which should be adopted in all our churches, and his efforts resulted in raising the amount to be paid into the treasury annually by that church about $300. Those in the church who had been in trial about some of my testimonies, especially respecting the dress question, became fully settled on hearing the matter explained. The health and the dress reform were adopted, and a large amount was raised for the Health Institute. Here I think in my duty to state that as this work was in progress, unfortunately a wealthy brother from the state of New York visited right after calling at Battle Creek, and there learning that we had started out contrary to the opinion and advice of the church and those standing at the head of the work at Battle Creek. He chose to represent my husband even before those for whom he had the greatest labor, as being partially insane, and his testimony consequently as of no weight. His influence in the matter, as stated to me by Brother Root, the elder of the church, set the work back at least 2 weeks. I state this that unconsecrated person that beware how they in their blind, unfeeling state case and influence in an hour, which may take the worn servants of the Lord weeks to counteract. We were laboring for persons of wealth, and Satan saw that this wealthy brother was just the man for him to use. May the Lord bring him where he can see, and in humility of mind confess his wrong. By 2 weeks more of the most wearing labor with the blessing of God, we were able to remove this wrong influence and give that dear people full proof that God has sent us to them. As a further result of our labors, 7 were soon after baptized by Brother Wagner, and 2 in July by my husband at the time of our second visit to that church.
Okay. So he's always at work, isn't he? Satan is always at work to counteract what God wants his people to hear and to know. Well, in these paragraphs, it talks about how James White actually started feeling so much better once he got into the work. And then we see that they were restoring the benevolence of the church to where it should have been, and that everybody was on board and they were accepting it and loving to hear it. And then what happens? Somebody throws a snake in the church. So now we see this brother who has come from New York, and although he came first to Battle Creek,
He heard all the gossip at Battle Creek and didn't feel like he had any sense leaving there against everybody's advice. And so instead of talking to them, he he goes in and stirs everything with heat.
He starts spreading innuendo and gossip.
Didn't check it out.
Didn't check it out. And what does it do? It retards the work. It sets the work back. I mean,
All that effort.
one step forward, 3 steps back. And then you've got to do all that again, because now you've got to remove the doubt from somebody's mind, not just one, but many people. You know, they were thinking, he calls him partially insane.
Partially.
I was, I've read all through this and looked at it.
Hearing him, I'm assuming he didn't hear James speak. No, he didn't.
No.
He just comes in and says he's partially insane, you shouldn't be listening to him, and all he's doing is this ruffian things.
And he's heard this from where? Battle Creek. Okay, so now as the plot thickens.
Yes.
Okay, sweetie. Okay. Okay. She did have some. Okay. Okay.
Bag that she has.
Okay. All right, here. Now they are at Brother Root's house, and that it says that it took them weeks to undo what this man had done. But it did come along. Okay. Next volunteer. Okay, Janet.
The brother from New York returned with his wife and daughter to Battle Creek, not in a state of mind to give a correct report of the good work at Wright, or to help the feelings of the church at Battle Creek. As facts have since come to light, it appears that he injured the church and the church injured him. In their mutual enjoyment from house to house, in taking the most unfavorable views of our course and making it the theme of conversation. About the time this cruel work was going on, I had the following dream. I was visiting Battle Creek in company with a person of commanding manner and dignified deportment. In my dream, I was passing around to the houses of our brethren. As we were about to enter, we heard voices engaged in earnest conversation. The name of my husband was frequently mentioned, and I was grieved and astonished to hear those who had professed to be our firmest friends relating scenes and incidences which had occurred during the severe affliction of my husband, when his mental and physical powers were palsied to a great degree. I was grieved to hear the voice of the professed brother from New York before mentioned, relating in an earnest manner and in an exaggerated light incidents of which those at Battle Creek were ignorant, while our friends in Battle Creek, in their turn, related that which we knew. I became faint and sick at heart, and in my dream came near falling, when the hand of my attendant supported me, and he said, "You must listen. You must know this even if it is hard to bear." At the several houses we approached, the same subject was the theme of conversation. It was their present truth. I said, "Oh, I did not know this. I was ignorant that such feelings existed in the hearts of those whom we had regarded as our friends in prosperity, and our fast friends in suffering, affliction, and adversity. Would I have never known this, we have accounted these our very best and dearest friends."
Okay. Now we see that she has had a dream. And in this dream, she sees, the Lord has showed her that the backbiting that's going on, and she's going to have to meet. And it's something that, none of us like to go through that kind of experience. And it wrenches us deep down inside. You know, to have someone who you think is your friend, to know that they are actually undermining you. It hurts. So we see that this is what's going on now. Okay, we're going to continue on. Anybody else? Sandy, how about you?
And it starts with the person.
Mm-hmm.
I got it. I'm ready to start.
Okay.
The person with me repeated these words. If they would only engage as readily and with as much earnestness and zeal in conversation upon the Redeemer, dwelling upon his matchless charms, his disinterested benevolence, and his merciful forgiveness, his pitiful tenderness to the suffering, his forbearance and inexpressible love, how much more precious and valuable would be the fruits. I then said, I am grieved. My husband has not spared himself to save souls. He stood under the burdens until they crushed him. He was prostrated, broken physically and mentally, and now to gather up words and acts and use them to destroy his influence after God has put his hand under him to raise him up, that his voice may again be heard, is cruel and wicked. Said the person who accompanied me, the conversation where Christ and the characteristics of his life are the themes dwelt upon will refresh the spirit, and the fruit will be unto holiness and everlasting life. Then he quoted these words, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, if there be any virtue, and if there be any praise, think on these things. These words so impressed me that I spoke upon them the next Sabbath.
Okay. So here we see that instead of talking doubt and tearing people down and innuendo and gossip and flat out lies, we see that if they had been looking at Jesus and talking of his goodness, that it would have raised them all up to a better state.
What I got from reading that is that when you are pushed down and talked about and the things are not true, instead of dwelling on that she was told that you don't meet the fire with the fire. You flip it and you tell what should the positive part. And it's almost like when somebody's at you, you don't answer anger that way to start the fire going, but you show them love. You show them Christ. And you rise above what they are putting down. And it sort of like changes the whole
And
atmosphere.
sometimes it does, and sometimes it flips on you, and they get even more angry because then
Because then they have accomplished what they set out to do.
exactly, and it points out to them their error, that they shouldn't be like that. And when the Holy Spirit is not working on your heart, there is another spirit that works on it to create havoc. And
I'm sure that the person setting up the rumors would not be pleased that she didn't fight back.
well, it
But
doesn't
the-
seem to be
but
just
the-
one.
But the other people that were kind of siding with the person that was sending the gossip,
Mm-hmm.
they could see that she had something inside of her that was different from them.
Yes. Well, it talks about how it just wasn't that one person, that it was a lot of the friends that they thought they had, that they engaged in, that they didn't know what this person was talking about, but they decided that they would relate what they knew about. So they even added to it. So to compound the situation, they were trying to destroy you know. And they, you know, they were, whether it was unknowing or not, they were working against God and the Spirit of God, because God was trying to teach them and they were trying to tear down. And sometimes we don't even recognize it when we're being used. Okay. All right, now I just lost my place because I flipped back and forth. Oh yes, here we are. Okay. Someone else, please. Media? Do you have a mic? There you go. We've got a couple.
My labors in the right were very wearing. I had much care of my husband by day and sometimes in the night. I gave him baths and took him out to ride, and twice a day, cold, stormy, or pleasant, walked out with him. I used the pen while he dictated his reports for the review, and also wrote many letters, in addition to many pages of personal testimonies, and most of all number 11, besides visiting and speaking as often and as long and as earnestly as I did. Brother and Sister Ruth fully sympathized with me in my trials and labors, and watched with the tenderest care to supply all our wants. Her prayers were frequent that the Lord would bless them in the basket and in store and in health, as well as in grace and spiritual strength, and I felt that a special blessing would follow them. Though sickness has since come into their dwelling, yet I learned by Brother Ruth that they now enjoy better health than before. And among the items of temporal prosperity, he reports that his wheat fields have produced 27 bushels to the acre, and some 40, while the average yield of his neighbor's fields has been only 7 bushels per acre. January 29, 1867, we left Wright and rode to Greenville, Macomb County, a distance of 40 miles. It was the most severely cold day of the winter, and we were glad to find a shelter from the cold storm at Brother Manner's. This dear family welcomed us to their hearts and to their home. We remained in this vicinity 6 weeks, laboring with the churches at Greenville and Orleans, and making Brother Magner's hospitable home in our headquarters. The Lord gave me freedom in speaking to the people. In every effort made, I realized his sustaining power, and as I became fully convinced that I had a testimony for the people which I could bear to them in connection with the labors of my husband, my faith was strengthened that he would yet be raised to health to labor with the acceptance in the cause and work of God. His labors were received by the people, and he was a great help to me in the work. Without him I could accomplish but little, but with his help and in the strength of God I could do the work assigned to me. The Lord sustained him in every effort which he put forth. As he ventured, trusting in God, regardless of his feebleness, he gained in strength and improved with every effort. As I realized that my husband was regaining physical and mental vigor, my gratitude was unbounded in view of the prospects that I should again be unfettered to engage in anew and more earnestly in the work of God, standing by the side of my husband, we laboring unitedly in the closing work of God for God's people. Previous to his being stricken down, the position he occupied in the office confined him there the greater part of the time, and as I would not travel without him, I was necessarily kept at home much of the time. I felt that God would now prosper him while he labored in the word and doctrine, and devoted himself more especially to the work of preaching. Others could do the labor in the office, and we were settled in our convictions that he would never again be confined, but be free to travel with me, that we both might bear the solemn testimony which God had given us for his remnant people.
Okay, so we see a big turnaround as they are progressing forward in the work of God. God has brought him back to health. Amen. And that his vigor has returned, his mind is sharp. The Lord has been gracious to both of them. He's how do you bless that one farmer's fields? And everybody else was getting 7 bushels.
Couldn't they see that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a testimony in itself, that these people went out of their way to treat them with such grace and hospitality. That the Lord blessed them for that. And through all the trials that they were going through, they sympathized with them and understood, and they treated them with love. And the Lord blessed them. Okay, let's move on. Our next reader, Adon.
I sensibly felt the low state of God's people, and every day I was aware that I had gone to the extent of my strength. While in Wright, we had sent my manuscript for number 11 to the Office of Publication, and I was improving almost every moment when out of meeting and writing at a matter for number 12. My energies, both physical and mental, had been severely taxed while laboring for the church in Wright. I felt that I should have rest, but could see no opportunity for relief. I was speaking to the people several times a week and writing many pages of personal testimonies. The burden of souls was upon me, and the responsibilities I felt were so great that I could obtain but a few hours of sleep each night. While thus laboring and speaking and writing, I received letters of discouraging character from Battle Creek. As I read them, I felt an inexpressible depression of spirits, amounting to agony of mind, which seemed for a short period to palsy my vital energies. For 3 nights I scarcely slept at all. My thoughts were troubled and perplexed. I concealed my feelings as well as I could from my husband and the sympathizing family with whom we were. None knew my labor or burden of mine as I united with the family in morning and evening devotion, and sought to lay my burden upon the great burden bearer. But my petitions came from a heart wrung with anguish, and my prayers were broken and disconnected because of uncontrollable grief. The blood rushed to my brain, frequently causing me to reel and nearly fall. I had the nosebleed often, especially after making an effort to write. I was compelled to lay aside my writing, but could not throw off the burden of anxiety and responsibility upon me, as I realized that I had testimonies for others which I was unable to present to them. I received still another letter informing me that it was thought best to defer the publication of number 11 until I could write out that which I had been shown in regard to the Health Institute, as those in charge of that enterprise stood in great want of means and needed the influence of my testimony to move the brethren. I then wrote out a portion of that which was shown to me in regard to the Institute, but could not get out the entire subject because of pressure of blood to the brain. Had I thought that number 12 would be so long delayed, I should not in any case have sent that portion of the matter contained in number 11. I suppose that after resting a few days, I could again resume my writing. But to my great grief, I found that the condition of my brain made it impossible for me to write. The idea of writing testimonies, either general or personal, was given up, and I was in continual distress because I could not write them.
Okay. So just as they began and they really get back in motion and they're going forward, another snake in the church. We see that now we've got a letter being written, and to the detriment, how it affects her. She's wounded so deeply that it affects her in this way. And all of the work going forward is now coming to a halt because it's affecting her in her mind so much that it's affecting her entire being. Yes, the mind and the body have a correlation to which we really, we know a little bit about, but we don't know the extent of. But it affects us deeply. And so we see what's happening here is it's becoming to cripple her. Anybody else have any thoughts?
There was also a lot of stuff going on in Battle Creek, and in one of her testimonies, where she talks a lot about what's happening at Battle Creek, and
Sometimes, yes, sometimes man can have a plan,
Yeah.
and they really want to push forward with it,
Yes.
regardless of what is being told, because in their vision, this is what they see.
That's right.
And in their vision, it tends to glorify man instead of, in God's vision, He may require us to back off of our plans and go in a completely different direction because it will glorify Him that way. And, you know, as mankind, we have this attitude to take the glory to ourselves constantly. And, you know, whenever He works little miracles in our lives, you know, why is it that we don't want to give Him glory? Why is it that we always want to take it to ourselves?
And too, she
So-
talked about, in that same volume, she talks about where she had a vision and she sees the angel with the sword of fire upon Battle Creek.
Yes.
You know, she's warning them, you know, because you've not followed, you're not doing what God has, you know, there's things that are going to happen. And so she said when she heard about the fire and everything that happened, she said it wasn't a surprise to her because she had already seen.
And she had tried to warn
And
them.
she had tried to warn them letter after letter. And so God does that with us, you know, He tries to keep us.
Sometimes He has to do something drastic to get our
Yes.
attention.
Yes.
Okay. Let's see. We will go another 3 paragraphs. Anyone? Gail?
I need to not do too much talking because it makes me start to cough.
Okay.
I'm having
Curtis?
cough trouble.
Does it start in this stage?
Yes.
Yes.
In this state of things, it was decided that we would return to Battle Creek and there remain while the roads were in a muddy, broken-up condition, and that I would there complete number 12. My husband was anxious to see his brethren at Battle Creek and speak to them and rejoice with them in the work which God was doing for him. I gathered up my writings, and we started on our journey. On the way, we held 2 meetings in Orange and had evidence that the church was profited and encouraged. We were ourselves refreshed by the Spirit of the Lord. That night, I dreamed that I was in Battle Creek, looking out from the side glass at the door, and saw a company marching up to the house, 2 and 2. They looked stern and determined. I knew them well and turned to open the parlor door to receive them, but thought I would look again. The scene was changed. The company now presented the appearance of a Catholic procession. One bore in his hand a cross, another a reed. And as they approached, the one carrying a reed made a circle around the house, saying 3 times, "This house is proscribed. The goods must be confiscated. They have spoken against our holy order." Terror seized me, and I ran through the house, out of the north door, and found myself in the midst of a company, some of whom I knew, but I dared not speak a word to them for fear of being betrayed. I tried to seek a retired spot where I might weep and pray without meeting eager, inquisitive eyes wherever I turned. I repeated frequently, "If I could only understand this, if they will tell me what I have said or what I have done." I wept and prayed much as I saw our goods confiscated. I tried to read sympathy or pity for me in the books of those around me, and marked the countenances of several whom I thought would speak to me and comfort me if they did not fear that they would be observed by others. I made one attempt to escape from the crowd, but seeing that I was watched, I concealed my intentions. I commenced weeping aloud and saying, "If they would only tell me what I have done or what I have said." My husband, who was sleeping in a bed in the same room, heard me weeping aloud and awoke me. My pillow was wet with tears, and a sad depression of spirits was upon me. Brother and Sister Howe accompanied us to West Windsor, where we were received and welcomed by Brother and Sister Carmen. Sabbath and first day, we met the brethren and sisters from the churches in the vicinity and had freedom in bearing our testimony to them. The refreshing Spirit of the Lord rested upon those who felt a special interest in the work of God. Our conference meetings were good, and nearly all bore testimonies that they were strengthened and greatly encouraged.
Okay. This dream was a nightmare. Yes. And we see that, she looks out, she sees people coming to her house. And she knows them. And she thinks to open the door to them. And she looks out again, and all of a sudden, what does she see? The appearance of a Catholic procession. That's enough to frighten you right there. And then they prescribe the house.
Is it because Catholic, meaning maybe because of a doctrine, or is that what the vision is trying to show, or is it just?
I'm not real sure myself.
Yeah.
The word was, they have spoken against our holy
Order.
Yeah, so meaning different doctrine, was that different doctrine then?
That's all about Catholic.
Catholic, yeah. How do you mix it?
But these were people she knew.
These are the people that have sided with the Catholics.
Yeah.
So what's been going on?
They're turning in their own.
Well, they completely, she keeps mentioning Battle Creek. There was a lot of things happening in Battle Creek. And, Pantheism was taking, it had grown. It was this huge, it was becoming their doctrine, basically.
So the vicious innuendo coming from there.
What's the date?
Gossip. This travels through December 19th, 1866 to April 25th, 1867. So about, 6 months? 6-7 months? This is at that time. And so she is, this is something very surprising to her. And she wants to flee from what's going to happen, and she runs out and runs straight into the crowd because they have encompassed the property around the house. And as much as she's looking for some sort of answer and sympathy from those that she recognizes, they won't. They won't.
For fear of the Jews.
For fear of being found out that they may have sympathy towards her.
Does she ever explain this vision?
It goes on. And time is up. So next week we'll hear the rest of the story. So it was, when I read it, it was so interesting. And I thought we need to at least get to the halfway point because it explains, it kind of drives you into the story and then it kind of stops. And I thought this might be a good place.
Yes.
So it does hold our interest at a lot of times. But the Lord is gracious, and we have all gone through some experiences like this in our lifetime. And she was no stranger to it either.